Welcome to our webinar for today. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Safety Overview Class 1 Perspective, brought to you by the Shortline Safety Institute. My name is Michelle Malsky, the Safety Program Manager here at the Shortline Safety Institute, and I will be your guide during today's presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all participants for attending our webinar today. We hope that you will enjoy the educational presentation we have prepared. In case you would like to watch this presentation again or share it with your team in the future, this presentation will be recorded and we will make the recording available at the conclusion of today's presentation on our website, www.shortlinesafety.org. Just click on the Webinars tab and select the webinar you wish to view. To ensure quality audio during this presentation, we have placed all attendees on mute at this time. You will only be able to hear our presenters speaking. If you have questions during the presentation, you may use the chat bar located on the lower right-hand side of the webinar pop-up screen to type in your inquiries. We will dedicate time at the end of this presentation to read through submitted questions and provide time for our presenter to answer. If you have any questions after our presentations, please feel free to reach out to me with the contact information listed on your screen at the conclusion of this presentation. Now for today's webinar, I'd like to introduce our panelists, Ms. Becky Hamilton from CSX Transportation. Our presenter is live and on the line with me now, and so I'll turn it over to her to get it kicked off. Ms. Hamilton, the presentation is yours.
Thank you, Michelle, and I too would like to thank all the participants today. My topic for today is going to be our life-changing index, and it's something that we implemented fully at CSX in 2011. And really, as you can see from the title slide here, it really is about a new approach to looking at incident severity, and I'll talk a little bit about how we got there. So the first thing that we did is we did some benchmarking. We went out to industries outside of the rail industry to look at what their safety cultures were about, what were some of the things that they focused on, and we looked at all different branches of the military to include Disney, Shell, and really, from a qualitative competency, what were some of their targets? What did they look at? How did they measure safety? What was part of their safety culture? And how did they determine that they were successful in that safety culture? The other thing that we really wanted to focus on is safety communications and how did they reach so many employees or service members when, again, those organizations are quite large, like us here at CSX. So what we developed is our life-changing index. And really what it is it's a measure to gauge our safety performance. And it looks at it in a different way from frequency index. What it looks at, if you look at the second bullet there, is it's really based on potential severity of the event and how that event could have potentially affected not only our employees, but the general public as well. So you may ask, why did you want to look outside of what CSX was doing within the safety culture? Well, it really started for us back in 2009, and if you look at our frequency index as we progressed year to year, from 2010 to 2011.
Give us just one moment here, folks. I think we're having a little bit of an audio issue. Just give us one moment.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you back, Becky.
Okay, sorry, my phone just went blank like it got disconnected, so
no worries.
Not sure what part everyone heard, or what was the last word you got, Michelle?
So we were talking about in 2009, the reason for this.
Okay, very good. So again, back to this slide, we wanted to look at our safety culture. And interestingly enough, when we were looking at our frequency index, we were starting to trend in the right direction, at least we thought the right direction. But it really got our attention in 2011 when we had one of the lowest frequency indexes. However, we had 5 fatalities. So what were we missing within our safety culture? And that was really kind of, what led us to the life-changing index. Again, the life-changing index was fully implemented into CSX in 2011. And just kind of wanted to follow up where we ended up in 2012 with our frequency index. And I will tell you that in 2012, that was our first year in a number of years where we had 0 fatalities at CSX. So again, we went back and looked at the traditional severity measures, and when we looked at it, we looked at frequency index. And some of these things here, you'll say, underlying data to mature, a moving target. And what we kind of meant by that is, oftentimes we may have an employee who may initially be non-reportable, and then maybe 2 weeks to a month, maybe 2 months later, that will go from non-reportable to reportable. So it's kind of a moving target for us. Then how do we motivate our, employees around those measures when that's kind of a moving target? And again, not very useful for the managers from a CSX perspective, as these were part of their goals. So we wanted to implement something where our managers had a kind of a different goal that they could focus on, and they could react quickly to safety issues, not become distracted or frustrated by, oh, we thought we were here, 2 months later, our frequency index is here, we're not meeting our goal. And again, it just led to frustration and skepticism, and really, how do we bring our managers and our employees both into the safety culture on an even playing field on goals that they felt like they could successfully achieve. So back to potential severity is really what the life-changing index is all about. And so the safety department still on a weekly basis goes in and looks at both FRA and non-FRA reportable injuries. And all of those injuries are scored, which means that the feedback to the field as managers as well as employees is prompt. They can see where they are based on their experiences and tools that they have implemented across the board to, again, focus on those that have a higher potential severity as far as injuries are concerned. This here is just kind of an overview of kind of how we rate our life-changing index. These are examples from a 0. And I think what's important about this is, for us and for anyone on the frequency index, if someone has an insect bite and, they had to go get a prescription for that insect bite, perhaps they had an allergic reaction, that was a reportable injury. But we wanted to look at it from a potential, what are we really focusing on from a safety culture, as opposed if we looked at a level 2 potential where we had an employee falling off a moving rail car. So again, trying to hone that attention on things that could end up where our employees could be either fatally or catastrophically injured, and how can we develop something around that to change the focus. Again, this goes back to our expectations and motivations. Common purpose is to obviously eliminate catastrophic injuries, fatal injuries. And again, the decision-making process for our managers as far as what to focus on. And I will tell you that we have included this in some of our other measurements as far as our operational testing to really try to hone in, or what we've kind of developed, for lack of a better word, kind of a heat map for our managers to look at to really focus on, are there really any areas once we put all the data together, including our frequency index, that they can focus on. And this goes right back to what I was just talking about, is to really help allocate our resources. We have a program here at CSX that, based on goals, there is a rewards effort that goes to each of those divisions based on their goal. And again, everyone is at the same level, which makes it even. And again, focusing those resources on trying to eliminate catastrophic or fatal injuries across the system. For us in the safety department, we really wanted to understand why these incidents were happening. Again, when we reflect back and we say, oh, our frequency index is going down, but our fatality is still, 5 for 2011, we knew that there was something that we weren't looking at. And so we had to understand, not only from a potential standpoint, but really getting down to more detail from the managers and employees of how these particular incidents happen and the process in which, for example, falling off a rail car, really looking at the process in which our employees were mounting and dismounting rail cars, and is there a change in our process? And that change in our process may be a safety process, may be a rule process, or it may be a training process. So again, wanted to kind of go back to those three areas to see if there was a gap that we could identify or a gap that we needed to make sure that we filled and corrected. So again, goes back to trying to understand our own safety culture as our systems have changed, different generations come into work at a railroad, and we felt that that was really important when we looked at kind of the background of the life-changing index. Lastly, from predictive value, again, we wanted to discover the obvious. We didn't want the odds to catch up with us. We wanted to eliminate those catastrophic injuries, and again, provide a kind of a dashboard for our managers where they could go out and focus for, a week, a day on things that were happening in their area. Because as you might guess, weather plays a role. So what might work in, Florida will not always work in New York. So we were so focused before on just a frequency index. This really helped us broaden our safety culture and look at things that may be more predictive based on weather, again, demographics, etc. So we really wanted to be more predictive rather than reactive in our safety. And I talked a little bit about our reward program, and again, it's our safe returns. And it's based on life-changing index, frequency index, train accident, and some other factors that we have included. And again, it's a recognize and reward program for our employees. And essentially what this does is, those divisions that are meeting that expectation or participating in our safety culture through safety committees, et cetera, they get those funds to do improvements at their location. We've seen everything from lighting to landing pads, all the way across the board, 20-year injury-free pins, you name it. Those safety committees at that level, they determine what those rewards should be. And again, those monies are allocated based on whether they have achieved or exceeded their safety goals for the year. And of course, we provide those updates to the employees, to the managers on a quarterly basis, so they can kind of gauge where they are throughout the year. So again, kind of just, wanted to, the whole premise behind this was kind of looking outside the box of anything that we had ever done in safety before. And this is kind of where it's led us, and it's, again, been fully implemented at CSX since 2011. And at this time, I'd be happy to take any questions anyone may have about the life-changing index or how those changes impacted our safety culture.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Hamilton. We will begin the question and answer portion for today's presentation at this time. Some of these questions filter in. We will address each question in the order in which they are received. So if you do have some questions for Becky or for me here at the Shoreline Safety Institute, please feel free at this time to use the questions tab over in your GoToWebinar bar on the right-hand side there and type in some questions, and we will ask them to Becky here now. All right, one of the questions that we have here, pretty common one, will this presentation be available for future viewing? Yes, it will. I'll take that one right off the bat. As soon as we complete and conclude today's presentation, we will make this recording available to all participants here as well as anyone who has missed it. It'll be on our website, www.shortlinesafety.org. It'll be under the webinars portion, and feel free to check that out at your convenience. All right, looks like we're getting some more questions that are rolling in here, so let's start pulling them up. Alrighty, we have a question here for you, Becky. The question is, are you aware of any short lines that have adopted CSX's measure? If so, what results?
I am not aware of any short lines who have adopted a similar approach, and quite frankly, you know, I would be interested to to find out their results as well. But I'm not aware of any short lines who have kind of developed their own life-changing index or any other index that looks at safety culture.
Great, thank you for that. And not a question per se, but the next comment we have here is thank you for the presentation from one of our viewers. So thank you, Becky, for that. Our next question that we have here is, has LCI been rolled out as an index across all of CSX? And if so, how long?
Yes, LCI has been rolled out system-wide across our system since 2011. It includes, again, all operations and non-ops. So, yes, been fully implemented since 2011.
Alrighty. Here's the next question for you, Becky. What is your assessment of the effectiveness of the LCI since implemented in the year 2011? And then the following question is, what do the performance numbers show?
Well, that is that's a loaded question, and I'm going to be honest about it. You know, before LCI was implemented as a target goal for our managers, it was well received, and you know, but the difficulty in it was trying to communicate the process and what it was all about, because again, it was a change to our culture, it was a change to our safety culture. So that communication piece was essential, and trying to get them to understand that it was a tool to help them to identify areas that, again, potentially could cause catastrophic or fatal injuries to employees. So trying to hone their focus. You know, I will tell you that that once it kind of became a goal, much like frequency index was, you know, it was looked at a little bit differently, at least by our managers, maybe not so much by our employees, because they understood that, hey, you know, if I do well in this area, then the reward is that, you know, we're going to get money through our Safe Returns program. The effectiveness, I will tell you, is a difficult benchmark to gauge. Few reasons. Our man hours obviously have decreased significantly since 2009. And so with that, it doesn't, if you look at it from a purely frequency index standpoint, it doesn't appear that, maybe LCI, we may have to, tweak it or look at it again, and we have. Again, we feel like it's still an effective tool to look at potential severity and to provide some, guidelines for our managers. We have added some additional elements into our safety culture this year from an analytics standpoint that we feel that will bolster those numbers. So that second question is very difficult to answer, as we have made, several changes to not only our safety culture, but culture in general at CSX.
Alrighty, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, Becky, but the follow-up on that is what has been the reaction of the workforce? And you mentioned that a little bit, but do you want to just touch base, recap on that a little bit?
Sure. Again, our workforce, from the standpoint of it's another measure that they can look at. When we talk to our safety committees, they are in favor of something that they can actually control and discuss within their safety committees. Again, I have not received, from an employee standpoint, negative feedback, only that they just wanted to understand the process better. So.
Alrighty, I think that's a great answer. Thank you, Becky. We got just a few more questions here. The next one is, are the safety incentives CSX uses compliant with OSHA's current standing on incentives?
Yes.
All right. All right, and do you have a hazard identification and assessment program or work study process? Next part of that is, how are new hazards added to the index?
So that's twofold. We do have kind of a internal hazard analysis, and we also work with people outside of our safety department to ensure that we are looking at things as broadly as possible. Again, us from the safety department tend to get focused on frequency index, the actual injury itself. So, we do bring in people from outside the safety department to kind of audit us, or if we have questions or something that we don't feel that, we're subject matter experts at from a hazardous standpoint, maybe it's something outside of the injury realm that we need to look at. Again, perhaps it could be something as simple as working in confined space, something of that nature. We want to make sure that we bring our experts in to educate everyone in the process.
All right, and I think I have a final question here for you, Becky, that is a good summary last question here. So how did CSX come to use this program specifically?
Well, it really started from our board of directors. They too were concerned with the number of catastrophic injuries that we were having as they were looking at our frequency index decline. And so the safety department, went back and said, hey, we need to think more globally, and it really kind of sparked from doing all of those benchmarking sessions with industries outside of CSX, outside of the rail industry.
Alrighty. Well, with that will conclude our questions here related to LCI, our topic today. And so if anybody has any additional questions or comments that you'd like to discuss directly with our presenter, you can contact us and we'll set up that communication. If you need anything further, the email for me is listed right there on that final screen. So lastly, I just want to follow up with our participants today on the line here, and stay tuned with us for our next webinar in 2018. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Becky, for joining us as well. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And from all of us here at the Shortline Safety Institute, happy holidays. And as always, make this holiday and every day a safe one. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, guys.